Apache woman shot to kill. The rancher caught the arrow and claimed her fate. The land was wide and unforgiving, stretching under a hard sky that offered little mercy. Dry wind moved across the plains and hills, carrying dust and the smell of sun-baked earth. This was the borderland, a place where two ways of life pressed against each other every day. People here learned early that survival depended on caution, patience, and knowing when to stand firm and when to step back. The ranch sat near a narrow river that ran low most of the year. A few cottonwood trees clung to its banks, their leaves whispering whenever the wind passed through. The rancher had built his life here with steady hands and quiet effort. He woke before dawn, worked until the light faded, and slept with one ear open. He was not a cruel man, but he was careful. In this land, carelessness could cost everything. Stories traveled fast across the plains. Some were true, many were not. Ranchers talked about missing cattle, broken fences, and shapes seen moving at night. Apache families spoke of lost ground, hunger, and strangers who never stayed long enough to listen. Fear grew on both sides, fed by rumors and old wounds that never seemed to heal. Far from the ranch, moving quietly through rocky ground, the Apache woman watched the land with trained eyes. She had learned from childhood how to read signs others missed. A bent blade of grass, a disturbed stone, a bird that flew too early. These small things told her where danger lived. Life had not been gentle with her. She had lost family members to sickness and long journeys forced by others' decisions. Each loss hardened her resolve, but it did not steal her sense of right and wrong. She did not see herself as a threat. She saw herself as a protector. Her people depended on her awareness, her speed, and her courage. Every step she took carried responsibility. The land had once been open to them, but now it was filled with boundaries drawn by people who did not understand the old ways. That morning, the air felt tense. Even the animals sensed it. Horses shifted nervously, and birds stayed low in the brush. The rancher noticed the stillness while checking his fences. He paused, listening. Years of living here had taught him to trust that feeling in his chest when something was not right. He had heard talk in the nearby settlement. Some said trouble was coming. Others said it was just fear talking. He did not know what to believe, but he knew one thing. Fear often made people act without thinking. The Apache woman moved closer to the ranch than she usually would. She was tracking movement she did not trust, trying to make sure no one from her group wandered into danger. She kept low, blending into the land as she had been taught. To her, the ranch was not a home. It was a sign of change that never asked permission. Both of them were unaware of how close their paths were about to cross. The rancher stepped toward the river to check the water level. He bent down, touching the damp soil, noting how little rain had fallen. As he straightened, he felt it again. That quiet warning. That he turned slowly, scanning the trees and rocks. At the same time, the Apache woman noticed him. She froze, her breath steady, her thoughts moving fast. She had not planned to be seen. Encounters like this rarely ended well. She remembered stories told by elders, warnings passed down through years of loss. Still, she did not act right away. She watched him carefully. He was not charging toward her. He was not shouting. He stood still, alert but not aggressive. This confused her. Most encounters began with noise and fear. This one began with silence. Time seemed to slow. Dust drifted in the sunlight. The river whispered over stones. Each of them weighed their next move, knowing it could change everything. The rancher raised one hand slowly, not as a signal of power, but of pause. He did not know if she understood, but he hoped the gesture would show he did not want trouble. His heart pounded, but he kept his movements calm. He had learned long ago that panic only invited disaster. The Apache woman saw the motion. She did not lower her guard, but she did not flee either. Her life had taught her that running could be just as dangerous. She stood her ground, balanced and ready, but still listening. In that moment, both of them were more alike than different. They were survivors shaped by a hard land, carrying the weight of many decisions made by others. A distant sound broke the quiet. A shout carried on the wind, far away, but close enough to matter. The Apache woman stiffened. That sound meant risk. Others were nearby, and not everyone would choose restraint. The rancher heard it too. His jaw tightened. He knew what fear could turn into when more people arrived. He took a careful step back, not turning his back, but giving space. It was a small act, but a meaningful one. The Apache woman read that step clearly. It told her he was thinking, not reacting. Still, the situation was fragile. One wrong move, one misunderstood action, and there would be no turning back. Memories pressed into her mind, faces of people she had lost, nights spent hiding, days spent walking farther than she thought possible. She did not want another story of loss added to those memories. The rancher's thoughts were no calmer. He remembered his father's words about this land, about respect and caution. He had inherited more than property. He had inherited responsibility. Whatever happened next would follow him for the rest of his life. The wind shifted again, carrying dust between them like a thin veil. For a brief moment, neither moved. It was as if the land itself held its breath. This was not yet the moment history would remember. It was the moment before it, the quiet edge where choices still mattered, where fear and understanding stood side by side, waiting to see which would win. Both of them knew the calm would not last forever. Forces larger than either of them were already in motion. But for now, in this narrow space of time, they stood as individuals, not enemies, facing a future neither could fully see. And somewhere beyond the hills, the events that would bind their fates were already drawing closer. The tension in the air had grown heavier by mid-morning. The sun climbed higher, baking the earth and casting sharp shadows across the hills and riverbanks. Both the rancher and the Apache woman remained cautious, each watching the other with careful attention. The silence between them was not peaceful. It was full of unspoken questions and possibilities. Neither knew how long this standoff might last, but both understood that the next moment could change everything. The Apache woman had no plan to attack. She had moved toward the ranch only to observe, to make sure no one from her group wandered into danger, and to find a safe path through the land she knew well. Yet instinct had sharpened her senses over years of survival. She had grown up listening to the wind, reading the signs of the land, and reacting before threats could reach her. Every muscle in her body was tense and ready, aware that any sudden mistake could have consequences far beyond herself. The rancher, on the other side, adjusted his stance and tried to steady his nerves. He had lived long enough to know that a person who panicked in moments like these often caused their own undoing. He did not want violence, but he would not ignore danger either. He remembered the stories told by his neighbors, tales of people who acted recklessly and paid the price with more than just injury. The land demanded respect, and respect often required action. Suddenly, the quiet was broken by the soft rustle of movement through the nearby bushes. The rancher's eyes narrowed. He could see only shapes through the heat waves rising from the earth, but he recognized the pattern of someone or something moving with purpose. The Apache woman noticed it too. Ah! She understood that her presence had been noticed, even if no one spoke. She froze for a moment, letting the motion pass without making a sound. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of smoke from a distant fire. Neither had seen the fire, but both knew that wherever there was smoke, there were people. Perhaps someone from her group, perhaps settlers moving closer to the river. It was impossible to tell. The knowledge created a tension that pressed down on them like the midday sun. The Apache woman's mind raced. She had always known that survival required quick decisions, and quick decisions often required action that others would not understand. And she reached for the arrow in her hand, a tool she had used countless times to protect herself or her people. It was not a weapon she desired to use against a human being, but in her world, hesitation could mean death. Her arm raised slightly, her eyes focused on the rancher. Every instinct told her to act, to defend herself if the situation became dangerous. The rancher noticed her movement. He understood what she was doing even before she fully acted. Years of watching animals, children, and strangers had taught him to read tension in a body, even when words were absent. He stepped lightly to one side, positioning himself in a way that did not provoke her, but allowed him to intervene if necessary. He held his hands open in a gesture that said he did not wish to fight. The gesture was subtle, but it carried meaning. Time seemed to slow as both of them calculated their next moves. The heat from the sun, the dry air, and the faint smell of the river all combined to create a moment that felt larger than life. The rancher's heartbeat was steady, but he could feel the surge of adrenaline that comes just before a dangerous moment. The Apache woman's breathing remained controlled, her eyes sharp and alert. Each of them was aware of the other, aware of the land and aware of the forces beyond their control that were closing in. Then, in an instant, the arrow left her hand. It flew through the air with speed and precision. The rancher reacted without thinking. He moved in a way that instinct told him would stop the worst outcome. The arrow struck the ground near him instead of finding its mark. Dirt and small rocks kicked up, and the sound of impact echoed in the quiet valley. The rancher froze for a second, stunned by how close the attack had come. The Apache woman, equally shocked, did not flee. She had expected the arrow to force him back, to create space for her to move, but she had not expected the reaction she saw. The rancher's hands were steady and his eyes were calm. He did not move toward her aggressively, nor did he shout. Instead, he approached slowly, carefully, signaling that he wanted to end the moment without further danger. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words were not necessary. Both understood the gravity of what had just happened. The air felt heavier, charged with the weight of the decision that had been avoided. The rancher's mind ran through possibilities. He could retreat, leave her to go back to her group, or try to communicate. Each option had risks, but one choice stood out as the most humane. The Apache woman, sensing that he would not strike her, lowered her arm slightly. Her body still held tension, but she realized that he was not an enemy in the sense she had expected. He was cautious, yes, but he had also shown restraint. That small act changed everything. It did not erase fear, but it created the possibility of understanding. The rancher spoke first, his voice calm and measured. "You don't have to do this," he said. I mean no harm." His words were simple, but they carried meaning that transcended the language barrier between them. The Apache woman hesitated, unsure if she could trust what she heard. She had learned from experience that words could be misleading, but actions often told the truth. He lowered his hand slowly, maintaining eye contact. The gesture was deliberate, meant to show he was not a threat. She noticed it and mirrored his movement slightly, lowering her arm fully now. The tension in the space between them did not vanish, but it shifted. Fear had not disappeared, but it had softened into cautious awareness. Minutes passed like hours as both of them observed each other. The rancher made small movements to indicate he would not attack. The Apache woman made small adjustments to stay ready, aware that she could move at any moment if danger appeared. Both of them were testing the boundaries of trust, learning the shape of the other's intentions without speaking. Finally, the rancher extended his hand toward her in a gesture that was not demanding, not forceful, but respectful. "Come with me," he said. "It is safer to be still than to run right now." The Apache woman looked at him carefully. She weighed the risk of accepting his guidance against the risk of moving on her own. Years of experience had taught her to judge character quickly, and in this brief encounter she sensed something different. This man, unlike many she had met, was not motivated by fear or anger alone. She stepped slowly, keeping her distance, and allowed him to guide her away from the open space near the river. Each movement was deliberate, measured, and cautious. She stayed alert, her eyes scanning the land for any sign of other people. The rancher maintained a careful pace, never forcing her to follow, but ensuring that they both moved safely. As they walked, neither spoke much. Words felt unnecessary in the face of such raw understanding. Instead, they communicated through gestures, body language, and the shared awareness that their survival depended on careful choices. Each step forward was a decision, and each decision shaped the possibilities for what might come next. By the time they reached a small ridge overlooking the ranch, both of them were breathing more steadily. The Apache woman had not lowered her guard completely, but she felt a strange sense of relief. She had expected hostility, but instead found restraint. She had expected violence, but instead found caution and awareness. It was not trust yet, but it was the beginning of a fragile understanding. The rancher led her to a shaded area near a tree where they could rest for a moment. He indicated a small stream nearby and gestured that she could drink if she wished. She studied him carefully, noting that he did not make sudden movements, did not demand obedience, and did not treat her as less than human. In a world filled with harsh actions and harsh words, this subtle respect mattered more than she could say. She lowered herself to the ground cautiously, keeping her back to the tree and her eyes on him. He sat a short distance away, careful not to encroach on her space. The tension in the air had not disappeared entirely, but it had softened. Both of them were aware of the fragility of this moment, and both of them understood that the next decisions would shape their future interactions. They remained in silence, listening to the sound of the wind, the river, and the occasional bird. The world beyond them continued in its usual rhythm, but in this small space something had shifted. A moment that could have ended in violence had instead created an opening for communication, for understanding, and for choices that went beyond fear. As the sun moved higher, casting sharper shadows across the ridge, both of them knew that the day was far from over. Others might come, dangers might appear, and the land would continue to demand attention. Yet in this brief encounter they had discovered a truth that was rare in such times, that courage was not always about strength or weapons, but about restraint, observation, and careful decisions. For the first time that morning, both of them allowed a small measure of relief. They had survived the immediate danger, and in doing so, had created a space where the next chapter of their encounter could begin. Each of them knew that nothing was guaranteed, but the possibility of understanding had arrived, and that was worth more than they could yet fully measure. The afternoon sun hung high and heavy over the borderlands, casting long, sharp shadows across the hills and plains. The rancher had led the Apache woman to a small, shaded area near his property, a place where they could pause without being exposed. The river below glimmered faintly, reflecting the sunlight as it meandered through the dry land. Both of them were still tense, aware that one wrong move could destroy the fragile understanding they had reached earlier. The rancher kept his distance, sitting cross-legged on the ground while keeping a careful watch on her. He did not speak immediately. In situations like this, words could be dangerous. Actions and patience were often more important than speech. The Apache woman remained alert, her eyes scanning every tree, bush, and rock around them. She had learned to never fully relax, even when danger seemed far away. After a few minutes of silence, the rancher spoke softly. "You are far from home," he said. His tone was calm, without accusation or anger. "I can help you. You will be safe here, at least for now." He gestured toward a small cabin a short distance away. It was simple, built from weathered wood with a roof patched in several places. Inside, there was a small fireplace, a water barrel, and a few basic supplies. It was not much, but it represented shelter, warmth, and protection. The Apache woman studied him carefully. She had learned to judge character quickly. His words matched his actions. He had not forced her to follow him. He had not threatened her. He had acted with caution, respect, and restraint. That did not erase fear, but it made her consider that perhaps he was not like the others she had encountered in these borderlands. Slowly, she rose to her feet and followed him at a cautious distance. Every step was deliberate. Her eyes never left him, but she noted the way he moved, the careful way he avoided sudden gestures. It was clear he had no intention of harming her unless it became absolutely necessary. Her mind raced with possibilities. Could she trust him? Should she? What did trust even mean in a place like this? They reached the small cabin, and he opened the door for her, a gesture that spoke of courtesy and an unusual patience. Inside, the cool shade and faint smell of wood soot offered a momentary relief from the heat outside. The Apache woman stayed near the doorway, scanning the room, assessing the space. She could see the simple furnishings and a small bed. Nothing suggested danger, yet she remained cautious. The rancher noticed her hesitation. He did not push her. "Sit if you want," he said gently. "I will not harm you." His calm voice carried a strange weight. It was not command. It was not manipulation. It was a promise, backed by action. For the first time that day, the Apache woman considered that maybe someone could be different, even in a land filled with conflict and fear. And his slowly sat on a small stool near the window, keeping her back to the wall. Her hands rested lightly on her knees, ready to move at a moment's notice. She watched him as he moved to a corner and began preparing a small pot of water over the fire. The simple act of tending the flame seemed ordinary, yet it was meaningful. It showed routine, responsibility, and a focus on basic human needs, rather than fear or aggression. The rancher turned slightly to look at her. "You have been through a lot," he said quietly. "I do not know your story, but I can see that you are strong. You are not here by chance." The Apache woman considered his words. She had never met someone who acknowledged strength without challenge, who could see survival and courage without trying to break it. She remained silent, unsure how to respond. Words were not necessary yet. He offered a small piece of bread from a tin and gestured for her to take it. She hesitated, but eventually accepted it. It was simple sustenance, but it was more than that. It was a sign that he respected her as a person and did not intend to harm her unnecessarily. In a place where mistrust often led to tragedy, even small acts like this could create the beginnings of understanding. They sat together for a time, neither speaking much. Outside, the wind moved the leaves of the nearby trees, and the distant river sparkled under the afternoon sun. Both of them were aware of the fragile truce forming between them. Each was cautious, yet each sensed that their encounter was more than a chance meeting. It carried the weight of history, survival, and human choice. After a while, the Apache woman spoke softly. "Why? Did you not attack me?" Her voice was cautious, hesitant, but curious. The rancher looked at her steadily. "'Cause I saw a choice," he replied. "You could have hurt me, yes, but I could have hurt you too." And what would that have solved? This land, it does not belong to us alone. We must make choices that do not only follow fear. Her eyes widened slightly. She had heard words like this before, but never from someone in her immediate presence. Usually, words were used to justify action, to claim power, or to threaten. These words were different. They were honest and measured. She began to consider that maybe trust was possible. Not complete trust, not yet, but trust enough to survive the day and understand another person's humanity. The rancher continued, "You are far from your group. They will worry for you, yes, but for now, you are here. I will not allow harm to come to you." His tone carried a weight of sincerity. The Apache woman studied him carefully, looking for signs of deception or hidden motive. She found none. It was not safety, she realized, but it was something closer to safety than she had felt in weeks. Hours passed, and they slowly shared more of the space without speaking. The Apache woman examined the cabin, noticing the small details that suggested the rancher lived a disciplined life. Tools were organized, firewood stacked neatly, and food stored carefully. He was not a reckless man. He was a man shaped by the land, by necessity, and by patience. She began to relax slightly, lowering the tension in her shoulders. She was still alert, still aware of the risks, but she allowed herself to notice small details: the warmth of the sun through the window, the smell of the river outside, the steady rhythm of the rancher's movements. For the first time since leaving her group that morning, she felt a sense of observation rather than fear. The rancher, in turn, watched her carefully. He did not speak over her, did not demand explanations. He understood that her trust would not come quickly. Patience was the only way forward. He moved to fetch some water in a small cup and placed it near her, a gesture, simple and small, yet meaningful. The Apache woman accepted it, taking a sip and nodding slightly in acknowledgement. The afternoon stretched into early evening. Shadows lengthened across the land outside, painting the hills in shades of gold and brown. The rancher began to prepare a small meal, enough for both of them. He moved with care, aware that she was watching, and that every action mattered in creating a foundation of trust. She remained seated, observing, learning that not every human action was a threat. Finally, she spoke again. "I am not used to this," she admitted softly. "People usually attack first." Her words were simple, yet heavy with meaning. The rancher nodded. I know, he replied. I have seen fear and anger guide people too. But there is another way. Not all of us live by fear alone. Her eyes met his for the first time directly. There was a moment of understanding. Neither fully trusted the other, but both recognized that restraint and patience were shaping something rare. They were individuals, caught in a land full of conflict and danger, yet capable of something unexpected: respect and careful choice. As night approached, the rancher offered her a place to rest on a small bed. She hesitated, but finally accepted. The cabin was quiet, the fire giving off a warm glow as the last light of day faded. Both of them were aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new decisions, and possibly new dangers. Yet, for this night, they had survived together without conflict. This shared survival created a bond neither had expected. It was not friendship, not yet, but it was the beginning of understanding. Each had learned something about the other: restraint, courage, awareness, and the importance of careful choices. They were no longer simply enemies in a landscape shaped by fear. They were two people sharing a fragile space where human decency had the chance to exist. The night deepened, and the sounds of the land became more noticeable: the rustle of leaves, the distant cry of an animal, the soft murmur of the river. The Apache woman rested lightly on the bed, still alert but feeling the first hints of calm she had experienced in a long time. The rancher sat near the fireplace, keeping watch but not intruding. Each respected the other's presence, understanding that patience was the key to survival and understanding. By the time the moon rose, casting silver light across the cabin and river, both felt the weight of the day's events. They had survived a dangerous encounter without violence. They had learned that human choices mattered more than fear in certain moments, and, in that quiet night, both began to realize that fate had given them a chance, an opportunity to see the world beyond labels, prejudice, and assumption. It was not a simple beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. And sometimes beginnings were the most important moments of all. The next morning arrived with a pale golden light spilling over the hills and plains. The wind had softened, carrying the faint scent of the river and the dry earth. The Apache woman had slept lightly, as she always did, alert to the sounds of the land even while resting. The rancher had already risen before dawn, quietly tending to the small chores that came with life on the frontier. Each of them moved carefully, aware that the day would bring new decisions and challenges. Breakfast was simple. The rancher offered her a small meal of bread, water, and dried fruit. She accepted it, her hands steady though her eyes remained watchful. She did not speak much, but her presence alone told the rancher that she was thinking, planning, and evaluating each movement. He respected that. In his experience, people who moved carefully and with awareness survived longer. Trust, even tentative trust, came slowly in this land. As the morning wore on, the Apache woman began to speak more. About the land, about the rancher's life, and about how he managed to survive in a place filled with danger. Her curiosity was cautious, but genuine. The rancher answered carefully, never forcing his own opinions, but offering small truths that revealed his character. He spoke about patience, about observation, about understanding the land and the people who lived on it. Outside, the world was not as quiet as it had seemed the day before. Neighbors on nearby ranches had noticed smoke rising from the cabin. They were suspicious. Rumors spread quickly, as they always did. By mid-morning, a small group of men had gathered near the property line, questioning the rancher's actions. Some were angry, some were fearful, and all were eager for answers. The rancher knew he had to handle the situation carefully. He stepped outside to speak with the men, explaining that no harm had come to anyone, that an unexpected visitor had arrived, and that she was not a threat. His words were calm, reasoned, and firm, but not aggressive. He knew that showing fear or anger would only escalate the situation. The Apache woman remained inside, observing quietly, aware that the outside world was just as dangerous as the moment yesterday near the river. Some of the neighbors were skeptical. Why not turn her away? One man asked. Why let her stay here? The rancher met their gaze steadily. Because she has not harmed anyone, he said simply. And because we are better than fear alone. Not every choice must be made with violence in mind. The Apache woman listened to the exchange, surprised by his courage. Many people in this land acted first and thought later. The rancher acted with both thought and caution, even when others demanded immediate action. She could see the weight of responsibility on him, and it reminded her of her own responsibilities to her people. Each of them had to make choices that would affect lives beyond their own. As the day progressed, the Apache woman learned more about the rancher's life. He spoke of long hours in the sun, of repairing fences and tending to animals, and of the small victories that kept life meaningful on the harsh land. She began to understand the rhythms of his world and the discipline required to survive. He, in turn, observed her carefully, noting her skill, her awareness, and the way she moved through the space as if the land itself was a part of her. By mid-afternoon, the tension from the neighbors had begun to rise. Some men had returned, more insistent this time, demanding that the rancher act decisively. The rancher knew that refusing could provoke confrontation. He also knew that acting recklessly could endanger both himself and the Apache woman. He had to make a choice that would define both their fates. He stepped outside once more, standing tall and calm. "I will not let fear decide my actions," he said firmly. "She has done nothing to deserve harm. We will find a solution that keeps everyone safe." Some men murmured, some grumbled, but none acted immediately. The rancher's resolve created a pause, a small opening for reason in a world often driven by impulse and rumor. Inside, the Apache woman watched silently. She realized that she had never expected such a choice. To see someone act with fairness and courage even when others demanded violence. It challenged everything she had learned about human behavior. For years, she had assumed that self-interest and fear would always dominate decisions. This moment showed her something different, that integrity and careful thought could shape outcomes even in difficult circumstances. As evening approached, the rancher suggested that they move outside together for a short walk. The Apache woman hesitated but agreed. They walked slowly along the riverbank, staying within sight of the cabin but away from prying eyes. The world around them was quiet, the only sounds the gentle flow of water and the soft rustle of leaves. During this walk, the rancher spoke again. "I know your people depend on you," he said softly. "I cannot imagine the weight of responsibility you carry. But here, today, you are safe, and that is enough for now." His words were simple, but they carried the weight of experience. He had seen the consequences of decisions made in fear, and he was determined to act differently. The Apache woman nodded slowly. She felt a strange sense of respect for him, though she did not yet trust fully. Trust would take time. She had learned over years that trust was earned through action, not words alone. And in his actions, his patience, his restraint, his courage, she could see the beginnings of that trust forming. Night began to fall, painting the sky in deep reds and purples. As Stars emerged one by one, glittering against the vast dark canvas. The rancher and the Apache woman returned to the cabin, moving carefully to avoid attracting attention. The neighbors had begun to disperse, satisfied that nothing immediate would happen, though whispers and speculation continued. Inside the cabin, the Apache woman prepared a small space for herself. She kept her tools and belongings close, as she always did, but she allowed herself a small moment of calm. The rancher respected her space, giving her time and room to breathe. For the first time, she felt a measure of safety, not complete, not permanent, but enough to plan her next steps. The evening passed quietly. They shared a simple meal, speaking in short sentences and gestures. Words were secondary. Understanding came through observation, patience, and shared experiences. Each of them had learned something from the other. She had learned that courage and fairness could exist even in a world filled with danger. He had learned that resilience and awareness could shape outcomes in ways he had not imagined. By the time the fire burned low, they both understood the significance of the day. Outside forces, rumors, and expectations had tested them, but they had endured without violence. Their choices had not only ensured safety, but had also created a fragile bridge of understanding. Both knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new demands, and perhaps new dangers. But for now, they had proven that calm, careful thought could overcome fear, and that decisions grounded in principle could shape the lives of many. As the night deepened, the Apache woman rested lightly, keeping one eye open as she always did, but feeling a small measure of relief. The rancher tended the fire, watching her from a distance, aware that trust was growing slowly but surely. Both understood that the events of the day were shaping not just their immediate survival, but the foundation for future decisions, choices that could affect lives far beyond their own. In that quiet night, under the stars and the soft rustle of leaves, they both realized a simple truth. Bravery was not only in acts of strength or confrontation. Sometimes bravery was in restraint. Sometimes it was in understanding, and sometimes it was in making the right choice even when others demanded a different path. By the end of part 4, both the rancher and the Apache woman had grown in subtle ways. Their understanding of each other deepened. The rancher had shown courage and fairness even in the face of pressure. The Apache woman had learned that restraint and careful observation could reveal character beyond fear. The choices they made together, small as they seemed, were shaping the direction of their lives. The night stretched on, quiet and still, leaving the land in peace for a brief moment. Both knew that the morning would bring new challenges, but they also knew that together they had created a fragile bond, one that could withstand suspicion, fear, and even the weight of history itself. For now, that bond was enough. The dawn arrived slowly over the borderlands, painting the hills and plains in soft shades of gold and orange. The world seemed quieter than usual, as if it too was aware that this day would be different. The Apache woman had slept lightly, as she always did, alert to the sounds of the land even while resting. The rancher had risen early, tending to the small chores that came with life on the frontier. Both of them were aware that the choices they made today could shape the rest of their lives. The Apache woman had spent the night thinking about the events of the past days. She had expected hostility, violence, or betrayal. Instead, she had found patience, careful thought, and restraint. It was unusual and disarming. She understood that the rancher's choices had saved her life, not just once, but repeatedly. That realization stirred a mixture of gratitude, curiosity, and cautious hope. She did not fully trust him yet, but she felt the beginnings of respect. The rancher noticed her thoughtful expression as she sat near the fire. He did not press her to speak, knowing that trust and understanding required time. Instead, he focused on practical matters, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and preparing a simple breakfast for them both. The Apache woman watched quietly, learning more about his habits, his discipline, and his calm approach to life. She began to see the strength in him, not only in body, but in mind and spirit. As the sun rose higher, the neighbors who had been curious and suspicious the day before returned, bringing questions, rumors, and demands. Some were angry that the rancher had sheltered the Apache woman. Others feared what might happen if she stayed. The rancher stepped outside to speak with them, keeping his tone calm and firm. "She has done nothing to harm anyone," he said. "We will not act out of fear. Safety is important, but so is fairness." Some men grumbled, others looked doubtful, but the rancher's confidence and calm presence held their attention. They could not force his hand without causing a scene or disrupting the fragile peace he had created. Slowly, they began to disperse, leaving the rancher and the Apache woman in a quiet, tense calm. The woman understood that this man was not only courageous, but also wise. He had chosen restraint and reason over force, even when pressured by others. As the morning turned to afternoon, the Apache woman spoke more freely. She asked questions about the ranch, about life in this place, and about the man who had chosen to protect her rather than see her harmed. She learned that the rancher had faced many difficult choices in his life, decisions that required careful thought and patience. And she also began to understand that courage was not only about fighting, it was about restraint, observation, and protecting what mattered most. The rancher, in turn, observed her carefully. He noted her skill, her awareness, and the quiet strength she carried. She had lived through hardship, loss, and danger, and yet she remained composed, thoughtful, and deliberate in her actions. He realized that she was not only capable, but wise in ways that many people on the frontier were not. He had seen her courage in the way she had handled the arrow incident, and he respected her deeply for it. By mid-afternoon, the decision that would shape her fate had to be made. The rancher had considered the options carefully. He could leave her to return to her group, risk the dangers of the surrounding land, or he could offer her protection and guidance within the safety of his property. He also knew that outside forces, neighbors, authorities, and others, might not understand his choice. Acting with integrity required both courage and conviction. He approached her gently, speaking in a calm, measured tone. "You have a choice," he said. "You can stay here, where you will be safe, or you can leave and return to your people. Whatever you choose, it must be your decision. No one can decide it for you." His words were simple, yet heavy with responsibility. They placed the power in her hands while also showing that he respected her agency. The Apache woman considered his words carefully. She weighed the risks of leaving against the safety and possibilities of staying. She thought about her people, about the land, and about the future. Her mind traced paths through the hills, the river, and the ranch, imagining each choice and its consequences. Finally, she understood that fate had given her more than one option, and that this moment would define her next steps. She spoke softly, choosing her words with care. "I will stay," she said. Her voice was steady, though her heart beat faster than usual. "I will stay not because I have no other path, but because I trust that this choice will keep me safe and allow me to live fully even in a world filled with danger." The rancher nodded, understanding the depth of her decision. It was not simple compliance. It was a deliberate choice made from awareness and courage. The rancher offered her a place to rest inside the cabin, as well as his guidance in navigating the surrounding land. He also explained the routines and precautions they would follow to ensure safety. She listened carefully, absorbing every detail, understanding that survival in this environment depended on careful attention to both the land and the people around her. As evening approached, they worked together to prepare the cabin and the nearby land. The Apache woman learned small tasks that had practical importance: tending the fire, storing water, and maintaining a safe path to the river. The rancher observed her skillfully, noting her precision and awareness. Each action they took together strengthened a quiet bond between them, built on respect, shared survival, and understanding. The neighbors had accepted, though not fully, that the Apache woman would remain under the rancher's protection. Rumors continued, but the calm confidence of both the rancher and the woman discouraged unnecessary conflict. People on the frontier were pragmatic. They understood that while fear often guided action, caution and reason could prevent unnecessary loss. By nightfall, the Apache woman felt a sense of peace she had not known in years. The day had been filled with choices, challenges, and careful decisions, yet she had survived, learned, and grown. The rancher had shown her that courage could take many forms: restraint, patience, careful observation, and protection of life. She realized that this day had changed the course of her life, giving her the possibility of safety, growth, and understanding in a harsh and unpredictable world. The rancher tended the fire as night settled over the land. The stars glittered overhead, bright and clear against the dark sky. The Apache woman sat nearby, keeping one eye open, as she always did, but allowing herself a measure of calm. The land was still, the river flowed quietly, and for the first time in many days, she felt a sense of belonging, even if temporary, in this place. They spoke in quiet tones about the day, about survival, and about the choices they had made. Words were simple but meaningful. Each of them had learned from the other about courage, integrity, patience, and understanding. The moments they shared created a connection that went beyond fear, labels, and conflict. It was a bond built on human choice and respect, rare in a world that often demanded quick judgment and violence. As the fire burned low, the Apache woman reflected on her journey. She thought of her people, her past, and the dangers she had faced. She also thought of the man who had chosen restraint, who had valued life over fear, and who had allowed her to make her own decisions. She understood that fate had intervened not through violence or force, but through the careful choices of two people willing to act with integrity. The rancher, watching her quietly, felt a similar understanding. He had acted not out of fear, but out of principle. He had chosen to protect life rather than to destroy it, to offer understanding rather than impose judgment. He knew that the decisions of the past days would be remembered, not in the pages of history, perhaps, but in the quiet lives of those they had touched and the lessons that would carry forward. By the end of the night, both of them rested lightly, aware that tomorrow would bring new challenges, yet confident that they had survived a turning point together. Their choices had shaped a path forward, one that allowed for trust, understanding, and mutual respect. The land remained harsh and unforgiving, but within it, they had found the possibility of safety, wisdom, and human connection. In the days that followed, the Apache woman began to help more with the ranch, learning the routines and sharing her own knowledge of the land. The rancher respected her skill, awareness, and independence. They continued to live side by side, each learning from the other, and each making choices that reflected courage, patience, and understanding.